Hi, everybody. Bryan Norcross here with a Tuesday evening update on amazing, incredible, and potentially catastrophic Hurricane Milton. Let's look at it here this evening. And what we have is this incredibly well developed storm again. It went through kind of an internal process earlier today and last night and reformed a new eye, and that disrupted the circulation for a while. That new eye was larger, expanded the storm some, then it shrunk in, and now we may get another cycle like that. But this has had an effect on the track today in that it's wobbled over to the right. In other words, moving to the right side of the cone, pushing the cone a little bit to the right. We'll see how that plays out in the end, but I'll go over how that has affected the cone in just a second. But look at this, 165 mile per hour winds at least in the storm. The pressure 905 as of an update that came out after the 5 p.m. advisory, but I've seen 904 so far, and it might even be lower than that, closer to 900. So this storm is just incredibly intense. So what does this mean in terms of Florida? Well, that means that there's more energy in the system. That energy is going to go somewhere, and what it's going to do is it's going to go into spreading out the storm. So as a result of that, the National Hurricane Center has sort of expanded the area under various watches and storm surge levels and so forth. And we'll go over all of that for the whole state of Florida here in just a moment. Okay, let's look at this close up here, and you can see it's this very donut-shaped storm. And now we can start to see here in these last few pictures, see this kind of kink coming in here. I think that's a sign of a new eye wall is trying to form. So this old one is shrinking, the new one forms, and the system gets bigger. Why is that important? Well, the bigger the system, the more storm surge it's going to produce. As we saw with Hurricane Helene a couple of weeks ago, which was a giant system, it produced tremendous storm surge for its relative strength. Now, it came ashore as a Category 4, but for most of the time running up the state, it was not that. It was weaker than that. So it's these giant storms that produce huge storm surge along the coast. The bigger this one gets, the more storm surge it's going to produce, the more dangerous it obviously is along the Florida West Coast, especially near and south of where it comes ashore. So here's the cone as of the 5 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. We know that the intensity is at least 165 here. So in this area right in here, it still looks prime for intensification. The factors that are going to weaken it are just trying to influence it yet, but not influencing it yet. That's the idea. Because if you remember from Helene, the warm water comes out of the Caribbean and then tries to make a right into the Straits of Florida there south of the Florida Keys. But some of it comes up and kind of makes a loop up here called the loop current and then goes that way. And this loop current is incredibly deep and warm, and this hurricane is forecasted to go over that. So it's going to have this extra fuel here in the short term. So the thinking is it's going to continue to be a very intense storm in the overnight hours into tomorrow and through most of the day tomorrow, and then maybe the weakening starts during the afternoon hours tomorrow. When it says Wednesday p.m. there, it means Wednesday mid-afternoon, nominally 2 p.m. Eastern time. And then moving through the evening tomorrow into the overnight, so this Thursday a.m. means nominally 2 a.m. Notice the top winds are down considerably. This is because strong upper-level winds from what's called the subtropical jet stream are going to be blasting across the northern Gulf. So as this system gets farther north, the upper-level winds are going to be pushing dry air into it, and that will start an unraveling process. so that that energy that's in the storm will expand out and the whole system will expand out, and it's forecast to about double in size. In other words, occupy the entire west coast of the state of Florida in terms of creating storm surge. So that's why we have all these warnings all over the state of Florida now for all different kinds of hazards. And we'll get to the details on that in a moment. You notice in Orlando metropolitan area, wind speeds somewhat like Charlie. If you were around 20 years ago now for Hurricane Charlie, did a lot of damage, took down a lot of trees and so forth in the Orlando area. Winds up around the 100-mile-an-hour range, 90 to 100, maybe gusting a little over that. Through all of metropolitan Orlando is the thinking, including Winter Park, including Kissimmee, and on over to the Space Coast as well, although the farther east you get, the lower the gusts, maybe 60, 70 miles an hour on the Space Coast, where maybe 90 miles per hour farther inland in Orlando. And we'll talk more about the mechanisms for that in a moment. Obviously, it depends on where the storm tracks. The strongest winds may end up being immediately south of the center, but then in a large area north of the center. So we're going to keep that in mind. The cone, remember, is only about the center. So even if the center goes like this, that all this area up here is going to be under very intense thunderstorms, gusty winds, maybe tornadoes, and very, very heavy rain, potentially flooding rain that will be significant. That's going to be to the north. To the south, we'll have a different kind of thing. We'll have bands of rain with individual strong thunderstorms. Now, what happened today to shift the cone a little bit to the south? You see, it still includes the Tampa Bay metropolitan area, pushing south toward Fort Myers, but with this perhaps more of a shift to the south, puts a little more pressure, a little more odds on extreme storm surge around Fort Myers. But what happened today? Here it is. So there it was at 2 p.m. today. So you see, this is the previous cone. So this is the cone as of 2 o'clock. The other cone we were looking at was the 5 p.m. cone, which has shifted a little bit. Watch it go. You notice it took the right side of the cone here. So that little shift over this way. So now it's driving up like that. So that has shifted the whole cone over for the 5 p.m. Now, does this mean we're not going to have damaging, potentially catastrophic storm surge in St. Pete Beach, Madeira Beach, and other parts of Pinellas County and the Tampa Bay area? Doesn't mean that. It just means from an odds standpoint, the odds are a little better for you guys. The odds are a little worse for the Fort Myers, Charlotte Harbor, Punta Gorda, Venice area. But we'll have to see, because it wobbled to the right doesn't mean it can't wobble back to the left. We have plenty of time to go here. And how is this going to play out? So this is not like a conventional hurricane. Here we are now. There's a band of showers and a few thunderstorms kind of from the Tampa area over into the Treasure Coast. And that's moved up from the south slowly in advance of the storm. If you think about it, the flow on this side of the storm is pushing this way, is the tropical air pushes in, so that's pushing that kind of old front to the north, and it's dissipating as we've gone through the day. Here's the hurricane down here, of course, in the lower left, and here we are tonight. So watch it go through time. I'm going to stop it here as we go. And here you see, by tomorrow morning, still forecast to have a real donut-shaped storm. And as you saw, the forecast is for a 150-mile-an-hour hurricane. So still a very strong hurricane in the morning hours. But we're starting to get a strong band out here, and we're starting to get more of a comma shape to it, more like this. It's just beginning in the morning hours. Now watch as we go through the day today. This band is going to move through the southern part of Florida. So during the day, the weather is going to deteriorate way in advance of when the center is. So we're going to concentrate less on the center as we go tomorrow. Here we go. Now we're going to 1 p.m. You notice it's turning in to a little bit more of a croissant here than a donut, and we're getting the rain being more intense up here. What's happening is that jet stream I was telling you about is coming this way, and it's enhancing the thunderstorms underneath of it. So that's going to be north of the hurricane. So it's these two kind of phenomena are emerging. The tropical system is moving into a more northern energy system, which is that jet stream moving across the northern Gulf. So there we are at 1 p.m., moving forward in time now. Here we are at 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Now you see it's just opening up some, but we're getting this very intense area up to the north. So even though the eye is still well offshore at 8 p.m., we're getting this very comma shape to the system, going up like this. There's the head of the comma, like that, down like that. And these bands here are going to be the worst weather in South Florida in terms of the weather. This is not the storm surge. The winds are still coming around here. There's just not much bad weather with it because there's dry air being pulled in on the south side. But the north side is being enhanced by the jet stream. So now let's... So that's what we have, that shape is going to dominate as we move on forward. There you see moving into 2 a.m., more or less a landfall time. And notice that the strong bands here, according to this simulation, have already moved through South Florida by that time. And we're just having landfall, but we have a lot of the hurricane to go for the northern part of Florida. So there's going to be a dividing line here between what happens in the south and what happens in the comma head, which is the northern part of the storm. Okay, so in terms of when is that timing going to work out, you saw what that previous simulation said. Well, the timing was that the center comes ashore about 2 a.m., 3 a.m., somewhere around in there. Well, how about the other possibilities? So we look at this kind of a simulation to see what the various renditions of the various models say. And look what this says. So here we are at 2 a.m. and notice almost all of the models here have it back still offshore at 2 a.m. Some do show it ashore. This is nominally when the Hurricane Center has it. Hurricane Center has it, the center coming ashore at 2, 3, maybe 4 a.m., something like that. So we have some agreement with that, but we have a whole lot that say, no, it's going to be slower than that. A few say it's going to be faster than that. And then other models say, no, about 8 a.m. So we got to be ready for this idea of when the center comes ashore. What does that mean? Well, the storm surge, the peak storm surge, is going to have to do with the angle of the wind. So this is the time, whenever this center comes ashore, when we're going to get the most direct onshore flow. The flow will be onshore for a while, and different harbors and so forth will have different reactions to the different angles. But for the maximum onshore flow, that's closer to the landfall time. So the reason that's important is because the tide cycles come into play there, and the tide is reasonably high in those early morning hours along the most parts of the West Coast. So we'll see exactly how all that plays out. So let's talk about the various warnings and what can be expected around the state. Hurricane warnings assume you're going to get hurricane force winds, and that means the power is likely to go out. You need to deal with power outage, and you need to deal with trees down. If you're in an area that's not evacuated, you're not worrying about storm surge, then that means you have to just be ready for this extreme wind that can knock out power. And if you notice, it's kind of in the base of the cone down here, but then goes all the way up almost to Jacksonville to the north, because of those strong, that strong part of the storm enhanced on the northern side. So that's the hurricane warning area there in purple, where the strongest winds are most likely. Now, if hurricane watch is in effect just south of there, including Naples and parts of the Fort Myers area, and that's to be ready for the possibility of hurricane force winds. If you're not in an evacuation zone, you still kind of do the same thing. You get ready for the power to be out for an extended period of time. You are very conscious of where your car is parked. You don't park it under a tree. You try and hide it behind a building or put it in a garage or in a parking garage. or something like that. We also have hurricane watches up for the Jacksonville area, again, being ready for hurricane force winds. Here in southeast Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and the Palm Beaches, the winds will likely gust up to 50, 60 miles per hour, sustained maybe 30 to 45 miles per hour. It's enough to take out isolated power. It means if you have balconies and high rises, take the furniture off the balcony. Don't have things around that can blow around and cause problems. But this should not be a big problem. They're not opening schools because you don't want high-profile vehicles driving around in gusty winds like that. But this is nothing that Southeast Florida can't deal with. People use good common sense. Same story down in the Keys. The winds will pick up overnight tonight in the Keys and then last through the day tomorrow into Thursday. They'll start coming down. They'll switch from the Keys from the south and eventually come in from the northwest. Storm surge in the Keys maybe 1 to 3 feet. Also, we have tropical storm warnings just on the northern side in case it were to take the northern side of the cone. That's just in case kind of thing there in the northern part of the state, but the winds will be gusty up there as well. Now, in terms of storm surge, we're all seeing these storm surge forecasts here up to 15 feet from north of Tampa Bay down to Port Charlotte, just north of Charlotte Harbor. So what this means, it doesn't mean in that entire area that the water is going to rise up 15 feet above normal high tide. It means that somewhere in that area. Now, if the storm comes in up in here, then it's going to be in there. If it comes in farther south, then it's going to be the southern part of that area where the peak is going to be. But this is all about what the peak in that area somewhere will be. Again, if the storm comes in down here, farther south, then we're going to talk about up to 12 feet in Charlotte Harbor, around Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, all the places so hard hit in Hurricane Ian. Is that going to happen? There's a better chance that we're going to get extreme storm surge down there with the latest forecast, but again, we're talking about wobbles here. So there's not going to be any way to know really until we get much closer to landfall. Also, again, if it comes farther north, storm surge up in here, very vulnerable areas north of Tampa Bay. And on the east side, because as the storm goes across, the winds are going to come around this way and drive water back toward North Florida, up the Georgia coast and the South Carolina coast. So you see up to 5 feet, and that includes here in the St. Johns River. So the water comes pushed in there by Mayport near Jacksonville and then down the St. Johns River all the way down. So this is a Hurricane Ian-y kind of situation where you get this reverse storm surge. Because remember, the north side of this storm is enhanced and you get the stronger winds than we would normally have on that north side pushing water in there. So again, these very vulnerable areas that were so damaged by Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Nicole, they're going to be subject to storm surge once again from this storm, depending on the exact track, but everyone needs to be ready for that possibility. So here's what's going on in the atmosphere. There's our hurricane there, and you can see here this flow coming down here. It's pushing in on it. This is the dip in the jet stream that's coming down. It's going to lift it north and keep it from going over the southern part of Florida. And what you can see is notice this line here is kind of moving toward the hurricane. That's the dry air being pushed in to the storm. So far, the hurricane is isolating itself in this moisture pocket, but this moisture pocket is starting to erode on this side. And once the storm gets up in here, where the winds are stronger coming this way, then we're going to get more erosion, and that's what's going to weaken the storm before it comes ashore. But in that weakening process, the jet stream is putting energy in the storm. It's going to expand out, and that's what is going to produce the storm surge over more of the state. So here we can see that in the computer model. Notice here's that moisture pocket. There's that dry air barrier right there. Here come the strong winds pushing in here like this. Here's that moisture that's over the state right now. Okay, so watch as we go forward in time through the overnight and into tomorrow and through tomorrow to tomorrow evening. See what's happening here. We're getting stronger winds in here, and they're driving this dry air up into the southern part of the state. So this is why in the southern part of the state, we're going to have bands of moisture. You can see them here. Bands of moisture coming through, but in the northern part of the state, it's this solid area of moisture, and that's where the most significant rainfall and possible tornadoes is, because that's where the energy coming in from that jet stream is going to impact the storm. Here you see it from the National Weather Service showing a level 4 out of 4 flash flood threat. And so we're talking about Sarasota over to about Cocoa, Cape Canaveral, on up north of Daytona Beach, Crystal River, including the entire I-4 corridor, and especially north of the I-4 corridor for the worst winds, heaviest rains, flash flooding, tornadoes, and a corridor of just plain old strong winds, a la Hurricane Charlie from 20 years ago. So this is a situation where everybody just needs to be aware what the threat is in their area. If you're in a storm surge zone, evacuation zone, you're running a risk if you do not leave. Along the beaches, people are leaving, but the inland areas, near the harbors, near the rivers, near the inlets, this is where it seems more questionable, right? You can say, it's never flooded here before. Well, we've never had a hurricane come in like this in modern times. We have to go all the way back to 1921, 1948 for a storm coming in like this, driving water so far inland. So this is a situation where everybody in the state needs to know their situation, use common sense, don't leave things out where they can blow around. Let's let this thing go by late on Thursday. The weather in Florida is actually going to be very, very good, and we can assess exactly what has happened. If you are not watching Fox Weather's coverage here, we have reporters all over the place. I'll be there through this entire event. And how do you get Fox Weather? You can get it on your TV, your computer, your phone, or your iPad. You go to foxweather.tv. It'll tell you how to get it. You can watch it. It's live and it's free all the time. You don't have to have a cable subscription. You don't have to have anything. You can get it on your TV. There are the instructions. Get it on your Roku, on your Apple TV, on your Samsung TV, your LG TV. Anyway, foxweather.tv will tell you how to get the coverage, and I can tell you that no stops aren't pulled here to give you the best coverage of this incredible storm. All right, we'll see you there on Fox Weather, and of course, we'll keep you up to date right here. Take care.